welcome to one of our very own, Joel Jackson. Thanks very much for doing this, because you took a bit of convincing, but we both know that you've probably got one of the best stories of people we're probably likely to interview when we do this.
Not just from our local area, in general anyway.
Yeah. So what I want to do is basically to take us through your life, because you've been kicked down a few times and then got back up and achieved some awesome things. So if we go back to the start, tell us a bit about where you grew up and what you're interested in growing up.
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in Barrow. My parents were divorced early, so I was kind of flitting between my mum's and my dad's. Spent a bit of time over Warney, spent a bit of time over Askham. Kind of lived all over the place, really, within this area. But growing up, just like many young boys, I had a dream of being a professional footballer. I knew the odds were against us coming from such a remote town, but I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast, really, is to showcase that no matter where you come from, no matter what town, no matter how small, that you can go on to achieve essentially whatever you want. Mm-hmm. So that's how my journey began, really. I was fortunate to sign at Burnley at the age of 10 years old, and I was living the dream. I was going into school feeling like I was on top of the world. And then at the age of 14, growing up, my sister was a massive part of my life. Just to touch on her, I mean, she was a free spirit, beautiful inside and out, kind. We fought, of course we fought, but she would always have my back. Mm. And weekends, she would often be travelling to away games, and that would be across the country. So she was always there to support me. And then at the age of 14, on the 17th of May, she was travelling down to Manchester Hospital for a blood checkup. And on the way down, she was screaming with headaches. And on arrival, scans revealed that she was having a brain hemorrhage. Elisha died that night. She was only 12 years old. And seeing my parents' faces and the pain in their eyes is a moment that I will never forget for the rest of my life. But it was through their pain that grew my motivation to be a better son and stand up and be there for them when they needed me most. And it was through my pain that grew and fueled really a burning desire to do something with my life, to make the most of every second and achieve my dreams in her memory. So that's where the journey really began for me. Perspectives had changed, what's important had changed. And then it was time to really dig in and focus on the football. And at the age of 14, so for the next 2 years, really, it was a challenge. Like you know it, Bonds, you've played in professional football. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trialists coming through the door trying to take your position. And you're constantly assessed, compared and analysed. And fortunate, after 2 years, I was awarded with the apprenticeship at Burnley. I moved down there full time. So, and like at that time, you were moving away from home. I no longer had the safety blanket of living at home, essentially, and no longer did I have the firm kick up the arse by my dad or by my mum if I was being lazy. It was now down to me to take the next steps independently. So that's when I moved down to Burnley full time. It was at that point where I created an environment that was revolved around football. There was no distractions. There was never the temptation of booze or women, because I would never put myself in that situation. Mm. I lived and breathed football. It became my life. It was an obsession. And I remember the lads used to call me busy bollocks, but like I couldn't help it. I was like all in. This is what I wanted to do, and that was my dream, really. So that was at the age of 16. Now around that point, now just to touch on a youth team environment, everyone thinks that football's brilliant, and there are experiences in football which are absolutely first class, but it is a test of character in a youth team environment where you've got 3 or 4 lads. You've got 17 or 18 youth team lads that are fighting for 3 or 4 professional contracts, and it's dog eat dog. You couldn't show any sign of weakness without being called out either by your teammates or by your managers. So it was a real test psychologically and physically. But I dug in, and by no means was I the best player, but after that 2 years, I was signing a professional contract. It was a massive milestone completed for me, but I wasn't there yet. And I remember at the time feeling happy that I had achieved it, but it was like, my dream was to get in that first team. My dream was to make my debut, and that's when I'd done it.
Right. Just a step back, because you've gone through a lot there. Like, going back to Leash first of all, like, second everything you said there, she was amazing, like, young girl. And then you say your family has gone through the fucking mill of it and they're still there supporting each other, which is testament to you guys, really. It takes a lot to come back from that, which you did. But just picking on, like, sorry, to pick on the sort of character that made you, is that what you say drives you going forward now? Like, is that because you're someone who's really disciplined, always works hard, peace and love to all men. You have a unique like viewpoint in life, and when they're slagging someone off, you've got something good to say about them, sort of thing. Is that something that sort of fueled that, and you've worked on since then?
Yeah, I think what's come from that is the struggles. That was the initial struggle. That was an initial catalyst, I think, for me to be so young when something like that happened and need to mature very quickly.
Yeah.
And you can go either one or two ways. You can be like, well, I'm going to sack it off now. This is all this bad stuff's happening to me. Or you can have an outlook where you think, I'm going to actually do something about this. Life is short. And off the death of my sister, I've tried to change things for the positive.
Yeah.
And I try and see things in a different light. And I think that, I mean, we'll touch on other subjects later on, but yeah. I mean, at that point, I think I still had that attitude where, you're right, I try and see the positives in every situation. I try and pick out the good parts in everyone, because I think that's important. And if you have an outlook on life where you look at the negatives, then what sort of life is that?
Yeah. But to me though, like I say, I've known you for a long time now. That's something, that discipline and grit is not something you had like you have now at the start. And somewhere along the line, it just got stronger and stronger, and you've stuck with it. Where other people have waned to go out drinking, like you said, they've waned to go to parties, whereas you've stuck with that disciplined approach to your life, and it's paid off. You got the football contracts, you got the job that you've got now, and things like that. And me and you look at now, even still think that's how you get by. That's how you achieve things, by being disciplined, and something that we're trying to probably introduce a bit more on that.
I feel like it's a snowball effect. It's something that I got in a habit early, which I was lucky to get into that habit, and it's something that's worked, and it's a philosophy that I've applied to any area of life which I'm trying to succeed in. And by being disciplined, by being persistent, by being hungry, but also having belief in the process. And that process has worked so far for me, and it's something that obviously I'll continue to apply and have continued to apply.
So what would you say to someone then that's sat at home now, lacking a bit of discipline, lacking motivation, not where they want to be? What's the first steps? How do you change that mindset and develop someone who is disciplined?
I think small steps is super important. I don't think you can come out with this massive goal and be like, right, this is what I'm going to achieve, because it might take you 5-10 years to achieve that. So I think you've still got to find some sort of passion in something first. Without a motivation, without a passion towards something, then you're never going to work towards it. And I think once you find what that motivation is, it could be through some struggle, it could be through death, it could be through something that happens to you, it could be a positive that happens. And once you've found that feeling, and then you need to pinpoint a goal which aligns with that passion and with that motivation. And then once you've got that, then you've got the foundation. And then it's a case of you giving everything that you've got. And I think that's the only thing that's worked for me, is by giving it everything. You need to be giving it, but disciplined in how you focus your time. I don't think you can, for instance, be a footballer and be, giving 100% to absolutely everything at all times, because you'd just be knackered. Well, maybe a footballer's maybe a better example would be sort of the job which I'm in now. So in banking, where there's so many different areas where you could probably want to learn something to get better at the role, but you don't want to. You only have a limited time to focus on certain areas. So I think you need to be very disciplined in your approach and how you spend your time, and where you give 100%. And then once you've got that, it's a case of persistence. It's every day, keep the grind going. And then belief comes off the back of that. And once you've got belief, then you can look at any challenge and think that you can overcome it.
Dead right, yeah. So I'm really like, it is a backbone of everything you've done, having that discipline. So hopefully people listen to that and take something from it for themselves.
Growing up, how much of your work ethic do you think that your mum and dad instilled into you, obviously what happened to you? Because I've only known you for a couple of years. Met your dad. He's like a dad to everyone in the. After every event that we've done, he's been there, gloves on, bin bag, don't stop till everything's cleaned up. It's like he's got to be a influence and a role model.
Yeah, I think both my mum and dad have been a massive influence, and my stepdad Carl. I think just touching on my dad, growing up, he has been dyslexic.
Easy for you to say.
The trait has obviously carried on, but and growing up through that, he has gone on to achieve like what he has gone on to achieve now and where he works. And he was a director at Jacobs, and I think.
And now he's cleaner for picture.
Now he's a cleaner for picture, but more on the case of like I read back to my dad's emails and like doesn't use full stops. His words are all over the place, and to say that he has managed to get in the role of what he has, I think has inspired me, and that's just simply through
backhanders,
hard work. A few backhanders. But yeah, that's literally through dedication, and he's been travelling to Sellafield, to Whitehaven every day, up at 5. He did it for 20, 30 years. And I think that discipline and that hard work, I think that's something which I've taken from my dad, especially.
His work ethics.
Yeah.
It's infectious. Yours is. Like, you'll do 7 till 7 at work, and then ring us on the tube on the way home, and make sure we've been doing bits, and we've done a 7-hour day, and
knackers.
We're in our dressing gowns. And it's like, it is infectious. So
I think
it's unbelievable.
I just want to make the most of every moment, every minute that I've got. I don't want to waste time. That's just how I am. That's where, I mean, Emily hates it because she just wants me to chill out and spend time with her, and I just want to ring you and speak about pitch up.
I can't believe how good a name Busy Bollocks is for you. I feel like I'm recording that from now on. I never forget cleaning up after the festival at Holker Street at Barrow AFC. The whole field was covered in cans, you couldn't see any grass. And you two left me there in the rain with your dad. Went to a christening, and I went, fucking hell, Howard, are you hungry? I'm peckish. Should I go and get some lunch? And he went, we're not finished. Howard, it's like 1 o'clock. I'll just nip to Subway. I'll get something at Tesco. Get us a meal deal. And he's like, no, don't give him an excuse not to ask you back next year. He said, let's finish it. 6 hours in the rain.
Yeah,
me and him picking cans up. I was starving. I was crying.
You couldn't walk for days after that.
It's unbelievable shift.
Because he's a lazy bastard.
You two were sending us pictures of Guinness.
Well, they're nice as well, to be fair. Just to step back then, go back to your football career. So obviously you're at Burnley a lot of years. It's quite rare actually you start so young and then go on to the professional ranks and have success in the professional ranks. So what sort of player were you, and how was that experience? What are the standout moments for you?
Did you go at 16? You left home at 16?
Yeah, so I left home at 16. I went through the youth team, and then at 18 I signed my professional contract. And I remember going out to train the following day, and obviously I was on top of the moon, felt like I was 10 foot tall, running out to train, and I was running around and lunge for a ball, and as I lunged down I felt a pop in my foot and a shooting pain go up my leg. I remember rolling around thinking, I was in agony at the time, and then scans later revealed that I'd broken my metatarsal. So that was the day after I'd signed my professional contract, so obviously it was a bit of a blow to the celebrations there. But luckily it was also at the end of the season, which kind of gave me the off season to fully rest and recover. But bearing in mind this was ready for the biggest season of my life, first year pro, and it was a frustrating period. In prior off seasons I had always trained hard, really probably shouldn't have done, but I trained hard in order to hit the ground running in pre-season. And this time I couldn't do that. So I had a decision to make. Do I fully rest and recover, but risk coming back pre-season not sharp, unfit, and not impressing? Or do I rest a little bit, but try and push through the pain to make sure that when I arrived, I started on the front foot? And with first impressions, such a massive influence in football, and one person's opinion, essentially the difference between you living your dream or losing it, I decided on the latter. And I remember working hard on the off season and started pre-season off. And I remember I was training with the first team, and I was running out with Danny Ings, Charlie Austin, Jay Rodriguez, Kieran Trippier. And Eddie Howe, our gaffer at the time, pulled me to one side and he said, "Joe, this season could be massive for you." And I remember running out to train thinking, is this it? Is this going to be my season? Like, Eddie Howe just pulled me. I felt like on top of the world. I'm out training for 10 minutes. I lunge for a ball and my foot pops again. My metatarsal's gone. I go to get a scan. I require an operation. I remember rolling around on the floor, tears streaming down my eyes, thinking, was this it? Was this my chance gone? Now, this was summer. Now, contracts would typically get wrapped up by Christmas for new contracts. So, and I would be out for up to 6 months. So bearing in mind, I'd probably not even touched the ball by the time contracts are getting wrapped up. So I remember gathering my thoughts and pulling myself together and thinking, this isn't it for me. If anything, it was an opportunity, and an opportunity to show character, an opportunity to work on areas of my game that I wouldn't have been able to if out on the pitch. And I remember seeing my competition, essentially my teammates out on the pitch, only fuel my motivation. I was first one in the gym, last one in the gym. In fact, I was probably living in the gym at the time. Felt like a machine, getting myself in the best physical shape of my life. And at that point, my rehab was a success, the operation was a success, and I came back playing initially earlier than I anticipated. And I remember Eddie Howe pulling me in, and he decided to send me out on loan to Barrow, who were in the conference at the time, in order to build my fitness and build my strength. And it was a true test of strength and fitness going and playing in the conference. I mean, I was only 18 years old, and you were playing with men that had spent a living kicking players around a football pitch. And I remember that on my debut, it started off well, and I scored at Fleetwood away.
I went to that one, I think.
Jamie Vardy scored a hat-trick. Or you say 4? Did he score 4?
I think they won 4-1 and you got all 4, yeah. And no one knew him at the time. Who's this skinny little lad absolutely tearing this league up?
So that was first game, and then second game was at home, and I scored on my home debut as well. It was like a last-minute equaliser. I remember running in front of all the crowd and kissing the badge. You were taking the piss out of me. And then that earned me a start for the third game, where I scored again and received man of the match, and I was flying at that point. I felt like I was back climbing. And then I got a call from Eddie Howe to say that he wanted to cut my loan short and bring me back within the first team. And I remember thinking, right, now this is my time.
What a phone call.
It was, but I remember thinking, I didn't want to miss this opportunity. So as soon as I got back to Burnley, I knocked on the gaffer's door. And I remember sitting down and saying to him, I believe I'm good enough to get in your first team. If you give me a shot, and I'll prove it to you. But at the time, this wasn't arrogance. I mean, I was only 18, but it was more a case I knew I had one shot to be remembered, one shot to make some sort of impression on him for them to get within his first team. And then I got the call. It was Norwich away in the FA Cup. You're involved, Joe. To what capacity, I didn't know. I didn't know whether I'd start or whether I knew I wouldn't start. The question was, would I be in the squad or would I just be a sub? Would I be a sub or would I be in the squad? And if I was just in the squad, I could be sat in the stand still. But if I was on the bench, then it meant I got a shirt. So we travelled down to Norwich on the Friday, and as part of the initiation, because it was my first game, you had to sing a song in front of the rest of the team.
Go on then, give it a whirl.
What did you say?
So I remember reaching to the table, picking up a banana, standing up on the chair in front of all the first team lads, And I bellowed out, "The man who can't be moved." I say I bellowed, I didn't. I whispered it. I was shitting myself. So that was the Friday night, and then I'm walking into the stadium, Norwich Stadium. I'm walking in the changing rooms, and there it was, my shirt, Jackson written at the top, number 44 written underneath.
Hellfire.
I remember running over to it. I was like smelling it. I just wanted to roll around in it.
Weird, man. Most people take a picture of it.
But butterflies were like obviously smashing around my stomach. And then I went out to warm up, and running out in front of 25,000 people was a special moment. And I think when you've got that many people looking down on you, cheering for you, cursing you, I mean, it was an incredible moment. I didn't end up coming on, but the amount of times I warmed up down that touchline, I probably covered more pitch than the majority of players that played the full 90 minutes. But that was the start. And then next game was Leicester away. That was in the league, King Power Stadium, what stadium that is. Again, walking in the change room, seeing my shirt for the second time, just giving me goosebumps. I remember walking down the tunnel past Kasper Schmeichel. What an absolute beast he is, by the way.
Really?
But again, running out in front of that many people and warming up, just an incredible moment. Again, I didn't get on that time, but I was growing in confidence and was confident that my time would come. And then the third game was Norwich away. The third game was Blackpool away. So not quite Carrow Road or King Power Stadium, but the atmosphere was electric. And I remember feeling most comfortable in the warm-up. I wouldn't say I was dictating play, but I was definitely felt confident and comfortable at that point. This game was different. We were getting battered. I think we were 3 or 4-1 down, and I was running down the touchline. I can remember trying to make eye contact with Eddie Howe at the time. I was like, "Get me on, get me on, get me on." And finally made eye contact with me. And he's gone, "Joe, you're coming on." And I remember butterflies just smashing around my stomach, like nervous energy just pumping through my veins. I remember taking off my top, putting on my jersey and like walking out to the touchline and looking out to the crowd. The board goes up. I was replacing Charlie Austin, so Charlie Austin came on. I shook his hand, and I remember running on, and my legs were like jelly. I felt like I was like, honestly, I felt like I was in a bubble. Yeah. I was definitely going through the motions. Was I at my best? No, I definitely wasn't. But I didn't care. All that sacrifice, all that pain, all that dedication, the struggle was all worth it. I had lived my dream. And then coming out of the stadium, I remember a load of Burnley fans asking for autographs, and then at the end of the line was my grandma. My grandma was there waiting, and then we just got in the car and we drove off, and that was my dream. Lived it.
Crazy, that, isn't it?
Class.
So what happened after that then? So you've made your debut.
Yep.
You've got on the pitch, again on top of the world. Like you say, you're properly in the fold there.
Yep.
After that, where did you go from there?
Well, it was towards the end of the season, so it was a bit of anti-climax where I was a bit gutted that the season came to quite an abrupt end. Then it was time for the off-season, and I remember obviously optimistic, hopeful about what the next season would bring for me. And just like most professional sports, football likes to play with your emotions, and the season didn't quite pan out how I envisaged. When I went back to Burnley, Eddie Howe thought it'd be a good idea to send me out on more of a long-term loan, which I embraced initially as an opportunity to show I was ready. But lack of game time weighed on my confidence, and for the first time my attitude started to falter. And then in the January, Eddie Howe was replaced by Sean Dyche. And with me hardly playing out on loan, and with Sean Dyche looking to bring his own players, it was an easy decision really for him to release me, which I completely understood. I mean, I've got nothing but good things to say about Sean Dyche. In fact, I always thought it was a shame that I didn't get the opportunity to play under him, because I think I was never the most technically gifted player, but my attitude of hard work, discipline and hunger, I think would have fit in his sort of philosophy. So if anything, I was a bit disappointed that I didn't get to prove that to him. But I left Burnley with no hard feelings to the club at all. They gave me an opportunity to live my dream, and I will be forever grateful for that. In fact, the last words that I said as I walked out the doors was, "I will prove you wrong." But they give me an opportunity.
Sick. Yeah. So I'm gonna obviously I know how this pans out a little bit. So fast forward, and you've been out on loan. I remember you signed, I think, for Working. You were playing for Working. Got Player of the Season.
Yeah, well, it probably at the time. I remember thinking I had been a professional footballer at a club between Championship and Premiership. I had made my debut at 19. I thought, surely I'll find a club. But I was wrong. I was naive, and after trial and constant rejection, I finally settled at Workington FC because that's where I felt wanted, and it was also closer to home so that I could go back and study another A level. What I didn't mention earlier is at the age of 16, I had always been fascinated by the stock market ever since I was growing up, and I decided to take on 2 A levels alongside my football commitments so that I had the foundations to pursue the industry if football was to fall apart. And with this, given my football commitments, given the majority of time was taken up by football, majority of my studies were actually self-taught for my 2 A levels at this point. I received a grade A in mathematics and a grade C in economics, and I remember being disappointed in my economics grade, but also proud that I had achieved them off my own back with very little external pressure. Now, there was very little external pressures because I actually did it. If I hadn't have done it, and if I was slacking, then I could tell you straight right now, my dad would have been on my back every single day. And my mum would be.
Was it your decision to do the A levels?
It
or
was.
Were you advised to do the A levels?
It was my decision. In fact, at the time, we were probably told it was a bad idea by the. Well, I wouldn't say it was told by the. It was kind of not frowned upon, but it was more of a case where it wasn't expected that you would do A levels. Like there was only 2 of us out of the club that actually did A levels. The rest of the lads went and did a BTEC course. Not that there's anything wrong with doing a BTEC course. It was just I decided to do A levels at the time because I thought if I was to go into this sort of industry, I needed them to then go on to university. So then fast forward in to the point where I had just signed for Workington. I had started off at college, and I remember like it was a massive hit to the ego where only months prior I was a professional footballer. Now I'm at college. I'm 20. I'm going to college with 16-year-olds. But in all honesty, at that point, I didn't care. I was still hungry and I was still passionate about my football and I was still confident that I could make it back up the leagues. And then at this point, as you say, like the season flew by, and I was fortunate to receive Player of the Year and top goal scorer, and I was on the verge of coming back to Barrow and signing full time there. It was actually, and around this time I had also taken my exams for my A levels, and it was a Wednesday, and I remember it was the day before exam results day, and it was also the day before I was meant to be coming to Barrow and potentially signing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sat in my living room and I'm hopeful and more optimistic about the future. And then I received. Now, what I didn't mention is around this time I was feeling a bit run down. Understandably, I thought, given the stress of my exams and my football, but my mum was adamant that I got a blood test, so I had a few tests done. Didn't think anything of it. My prime concern was my exam results, to be honest, at that point. It was Wednesday, and I received a phone call. Mr. Jackson, this is the hospital. We found something on your bone marrow. We can't tell you the results on the phone, but please can you bring your parents in at 11 o'clock the following morning? I remember staring out the window in shock before the news started to really become absorbed. And that's when I kind of fell apart. And flashbacks of my parents' faces the day my sister passed came flooding back in. How do I tell them? Is this it? So many questions that were going through my head at the time. How do I even tell them? So I remember calling my mum's friend to be there when I told my mum. And my mum came through the door and saw a friend first, and she was excited to see it. She was like, "What are you doing here?" And then she came around the corner and she saw me and she could see I was upset. She said, "What's up?" I said, "They've found something, Mum. I'm so sorry, they've found something." I just remember sitting down in the chair and tears rising to the surface and putting hands over her eyes. And I said, "I will fight this, Mum. I will fight this." So the next night was obviously a bit of a psychological battle, but we made it through. And when I woke up the next day, it was exam results day. And I remember scrolling through my emails thinking, surely some good news, surely some good news. And I was wrong. I had missed my grade by 1 mark, leaving me without a university.
Fuck, yeah.
1 mark, which I found out a couple of hours later. Obviously, I didn't know at the time. I just knew I'd missed my mark. And I remember calling around universities for the next hour, pleading with them to let me in, knowing fine well that I might not even be able to go. Anyway, I was finally accepted by Manchester Metropolitan to study maths. And then it was 11 o'clock came and it was time to find out my fate. And I remember walking in with my parents and sitting down, and the doctor said, "Joe, you have acute lymphoblastic leukemia." But it was his next words that were the most important. "It is curable." That's all I needed. Me and my parents stood up, we hugged each other. It was almost like we were celebrating. The doctor didn't know what was going on. It was more of a case that we knew it was curable. I looked both parents in the eyes and said, "I will fight this, I will beat this." So at that point, we travelled down to Manchester Hospital the following day. We were feeling somewhat optimistic. The treatment plan, the doctors went through the treatment plan, and it involved the first 5 to 6 weeks would be spent in an isolated room in a ward where I would be blasted with chemo, steroids, the works. And then if that was successful, I would move on to the second stage, which was, it was around 6 to 8 months to be spent on a day unit where I would attend 3 days a week and again be pumped with chemo, steroids and the works. And then if that was successful, I would move on to maintenance treatment, which was just oral chemotherapy and chemo injections into the spine. It's like an intrathecal chemo injection thing. That was third phase. So treatment was to start the following Monday. This was the Friday. The doctor said I could go home and get your head around the fact that you're going to be on treatment for the next 3 years. And I remember going home and feeling like it was somewhat of a honeymoon period. It was like news was spreading fast and I was being inundated with beautiful messages. And although overwhelmed by the support, I was secretly preparing for battle. I told those closest to me personally. They were my support network. They were my army going to war. And I remember waking up the Monday morning feeling prepared and then realising as I walked in the hospital doors that I was quickly not. There's a series of reality checks here. First one came, I was walking into the ward. We were met with a cleaning station where you would need to hand sanitise, you would need to wash your hands, you would need to wear aprons, you would need to wear a mask. I remember looking up at a whiteboard and seeing 125 days since. And it was a word that I didn't understand. I remember immediately thinking death. And a wave of panic came over me and I looked away quickly and tried to banish the thought immediately. That was the first reality check. Then I walked into my hospital room. We must have been in there minutes before screams from next door pierced through the walls and echoed round our room. And this wasn't one person, this was a family. What we later found out was the death of their child. Then the doctors come in and you go through the potential side effects of the treatment. It starts off as expected, headaches, sickness, diarrhea, before going quite sinister very quickly. And blood clots, hemorrhaging. I switched off. I tried to numb myself from what could happen and focus on getting better. And that was all before lunchtime. So the psychological battle had begun before I'd even started treatment. And then it was time for treatment. The Monday, Tuesday, I was blasted with everything under the sun, really. Chemotherapy, steroids by the dozen. Wednesday, I had an injection. I think it was a chemo injection into the bum. And then on the Thursday, I had a intrathecal chemo injection into the spine, and then followed up with a bone marrow test on the Friday. And I remember feeling like I was dealing with it well. I felt like sickness was under control, my body was battered and bruised, but psychologically I felt okay. And then Saturday was the first test. That's where balance was slightly off, headaches were brewing, all side effects of the treatment, the doctors would say. As the night and following day progressed, I was becoming more and more sensitive to light. And the dizziness was getting more and more. I was getting more and more dizzy. Headaches were getting more pronounced. But what I noticed most at this time was the insecurities that were building. I felt like a young boy who had lost all confidence. A once professional athlete now struggling to get out of bed. My mum has always been a no-nonsense, get-on-with-it woman. And I remember her telling me to get up and me feeling embarrassed that I wasn't. The doctors decided to let me out of my room. I remember pushing myself up out of bed and stumbling down the corridors, a shadow of the man that I once was, and walking into the communal area where we were met with a social worker and another young lad, a bald lad. And I remember the social worker introducing us and telling me that this lad was also a professional athlete, but his cancer had come back for the second time. And I remember my heart dropping. Second time? I can't cope with the first. Why can't I cope with the first? Why can I not get through this? I thought I was strong, I thought I was tough, and I'm struggling here. I remember stumbling back to my room and lying in bed, losing hope. And it was around that time where, as the days progressed through the week, I was getting worse and worse. I was becoming more and more sensitive to light, to the point where my head was killing me. I would be lying there, all the lights off, midday, no television, and rocking in my bed, feeling like I was going insane. And that's when my dad stepped in. He said, "This isn't right." He got the doctors in to check on me. The doctors continued to say that it was just side effects of the treatment. But my dad was persistent and asked them for a scan. And in order to keep the peace, the doctors agreed to a CT scan of my head, openly admitting that they expected to see nothing. And within an hour, the doctors came running back into my room and said that, "Joe, you have 6 to 8 blood clots in your head that's stopping the blood flow to your body." I remember feeling almost pleased that I wasn't going insane, that there was something going on there. I knew something wasn't right before quickly realising that I was in obviously an incredibly vulnerable situation. Nurses came running into my room, pumped me full of morphine, with my platelets so low and my white blood cells so low. They couldn't operate, so instead I was administered blood thinners and told the next 12 to 24 hours were critical. And despite the chaos erupting around me, it was at this point that, for the first time, I felt at peace. It was at this point, and only ever at this point, that mentally I had given myself permission to go. My mind had given up. Later that night, my family, parents, all stayed in the hospital. Those that couldn't fit in my room spent the night in corridors in the hospital. I remember the nurses coming in every 30 minutes with a torch to check my eyes to make sure I wasn't deteriorating. My parents, vividly aware that they had been there before. This is exactly what happened the night my sister passed away, yet she deteriorated. My body kept fighting when my mind had given up that night, and I made it through. And when I woke up, I was transferred to Manchester Hope Hospital, who specialises in brain trauma. And I remember being sat in the hospital ward, panicked at the fact that I had just gone from a secure, sanitised unit to a 12-bed open ward. And I remember looking out at a young lad with half of his face dropped to one side and his arms slumped behind his back. I remember him because the doctor said to me that his clots were a third of the size of mine. A stark reminder that that could have been me. In fact, that could still be me at that time. I actually started to like that place over the next few days. It was almost like a break mentally and a distraction from everything that was going on, given the amount of visitors that were coming and going. It was actually quite entertaining. And then the doctors were somewhat comfortable with the clots, that they were somewhat stable, and sent me back to Christie's, which I was undergoing treatment for the leukemia. And it was at this point that I felt that the mental side of things really started to toy with me. Going back to an isolated isolated room, anxiety gripped me, and my thoughts became ever darker, I would say. What was once a welcoming room had become a dungeon, almost like a prison where I was unable to escape. At that point, cancer was winning, and I thought that was bottom at the time, but bottom came in the most unsuspected and upsetting of ways. At Chris's, they had masseurs that would roam around the wards, offering massages to patients and family members. And there was this one lady that was renowned by the hospital as being a gentle soul, softly spoken, almost angelic. She used to give me foot massages. She was brilliant. She was such a lovely woman. And on this one occasion, she was in my room and she was massaging my feet. And she said something that I'll never forget. She said, "Do you believe in God?" And I said, "Yeah, I believe in God." She said, "God loves you and your family." I was like, "Oh, nice. Do you have some sort of connection to God?" She said, "Yes, I recently came into contact with him." I thought nothing of it. I thought, surely she's going to say something nice here. She paused for a second. She said, "God will be with you when you die." I opened my eyes, looked around the room, said, "Hopefully not." She paused again, looked up at the sky, and said, "Yes." I sat up in bed, looked at her, said, "Tell him no, tell him no." She said nothing, folded up the towel across my feet and walked out the door. I remember ringing my mum, getting her to come back in the room, and as she walked in, I said, "Mum, that woman's just told me I'm going to die." My mum started laughing. She said, "Don't be ridiculous." And the woman comes back into my room. She gets on her hands and knees at the bottom of the bed and starts praying. And that's when my mum flipped, chucked her out the room, and Armageddon went through. But that was bottom.
Fucking hell.
But from that point, psychologically, I struggled over the next few weeks. I must have been halfway through first phase of treatment. I think at that stage I'd only been in like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. I had another 2 weeks to get through. I remember each minute felt like an hour, each hour felt like a day. Mentally, I was all over the place. And it got to the point where I was leaving. I had ended first phase of treatment. It was going well from a treatment perspective for the leukemia. And it was now time to start second phase. And I remember from that point, my confidence was starting to build. I was still in the fear of the unknown. Nothing had changed. from a treatment perspective, I still had cancer. But psychologically, I was getting stronger. Now, earlier I said that the time when I mentioned to my mum and dad, when I found out I had the cancer, and said, I will fight this, I will beat this. Now, at the time, I thought beat meant survive. Beat does not mean survive. Beat means you wake up every day, look cancer in the face, despite the agony, pain, and smile. If you can do that, then you have beat cancer. And for the first time, I started beating it. Over the next few months, it went smoothly. Psychologically, it was still tough, obviously, but for the next 2 months, it was okay. And then halfway through treatment, halfway through second phase, I had a bone marrow test, and this was the most important one because it was to see whether I was in remission or not. And I remember walking in, and the doctors met us, and I sat there with my parents, and he said, Joe, you're in remission. And I remember it was all tears running down our faces, celebrating. Even the doctors shed a tear. It was a special moment for obviously the family, and that night we went out ecstatic and we celebrated. What I've come to learn over the last few years, well, is that all wins, no matter how small, should be celebrated, and this was definitely a big one. So that was midway through second phase of treatment. Still a long way to go. Wasn't on all the clear there, but my first remission had come through and we were feeling positive. The second half of the second phase was a bit more of a challenge, actually. It was a bit tougher. I struggled with the treatment a lot more. Wasn't really through sickness, but just not great, probably psychologically and physically, until I finally reached the end of second phase. And that was when I received I had another bone marrow test that came back that I was still negative, that I was still in remission, which meant I could go on to the third phase, which was oral chemotherapy every night and intrathecal chemo injections 3 times a year, which meant I could go back to some sort of normality. But life then was far from normal. I felt like alive, like reborn. That burning desire to do something with my life after the death of my sister had just been amplified. I needed a new goal to focus on, and that one was, the football was out of the question at the time. I'd always been fascinated by the stock market. The new goal was to get into investment banking, work in that industry. Now, at the time, I had 3 A levels, 2 in math, an A in mathematics, a C in further maths, and a C in economics, and a place at Manchester Metropolitan. Now, looking back, many must have thought I had 0 chance of getting into investment banking. Most of these guys have gone to the top-notch university, they've got A stars throughout A levels. But at the time, it didn't even cross my mind. I had belief, I had hunger, and I had no fear of failure. And I think that's all I needed. Going into university was a distraction. I tackled it just like I would in everything else by becoming obsessed. I remember being sat in lectures and my head dropping and feeling dizzy off the back of an intrathecal chemo injection. Now, this involved what they would do. They would extract fluid from your spine, and they would replace it with chemo. But sometimes, if there was a lack of pressure, or if I didn't rest immediately, then it would become unbalanced, and it would leave me basically bedbound for up to 2 weeks. Now, that would happen often throughout uni, but I still tried to get in for every lecture. And I wasn't the smartest in my year, by no means. But after 3 years, I won an award for the highest grade in my year, which earned me a scholarship to study a Masters in Finance at Cass Business School, which is a university in London. It's now called Bays. But what that did do is that give me that academic foundation to then start applying for the investment banking world. So it was now time to pass the interviews, the assessment centres, the tests that investment banks like to throw at you. And I did my research and I was true to myself. 5 years after the diagnosis of cancer, I had achieved my second dream, and that was a job at one of the biggest investment banks in the world. I had achieved my second dream.
And like some gaps in that as you're telling that story. I remember like when you were first looking at go to uni, you had potential options of getting a good job up Sellafield, like contracting or staff. And I remember you telling me at the time that it was a potential option, but you were going to go to uni, and I thought, idiot. Thought, fucking hell, that's a class job. You're going to go risk that to go get a uni where you won't be earning, and to chase this dream, as you say, which was, what's it, like 1 in 10,000 people apply for that job, isn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
Which is like, so the odds again stacked against you like it was football. But I remember at the time, like, again, dead honest, thought maybe that's a bad decision. And again, it's a testament to your character. You thought, no, actually, obviously you've had all that lived experience. I want to do this, the second dream, which the odds are stacked against me. Stuck with it. Again, the theme of like discipline, hard work, got you there in the end. And I thought it's just worth mentioning, because other people would have took that. I would have took that the first option of just maybe the easy option, which was a good option. But
I don't think this has come from when I was a kid, but I think as I've got older, I like to choose my own path and have that actually not fall into a job, but I've chosen that job for this reason, and I've worked towards it to get to that job. And so far, I mean, that's not to say that that might change and my opportunity might come in something else where I'm like, do you know what, I'm going to pursue that. But so far, I have benefited from just saying, fuck it, I'm going to give it everything, risk everything, and try and do what I want to do. Life's short, as we all know, and if there's something that you really want to do in life and a job that you want to do, then why not give it everything? But there's different circumstances. I've been very fortunate for my mum and dad to have their support throughout my football, both mentally, emotionally, and financially as well. Like, obviously, university costs are a lot, master's costs are a lot. The support of travelling, the cost of travelling around the country with my football is a lot. The additional exams that I took off my own back were help funded by my parents. Like, I think that's one thing from my dad, that my dad will financially support me if I show I'm willing and dedicated to do it. Because my dad's great, but he can also be very hard work. And if I'm not pulling my weight at all, he will be very, very strict. And he'll be like, no, son, you're not having anything. He will be that. Like, I remember when we used to play football, and on a weekend we'd be out in the park till, say, well, whatever time, but I had to be in at 10 o'clock, otherwise he would lock the door on a Saturday because we had a game on a Sunday, which is right. But if I hadn't been there, he would lock the door and I would have nowhere to go. I would have to ring my mum and go and stay with her. Like, he was strict, but I think I benefited from that, definitely. So, I've lost track of where we're going.
yeah, well, to be honest with you, I had another question anyway, so that's good. So obviously you've got to the point now where you've got a job, 10,000 people applying for this top job within a bank, investment banking. You've secured it and you've walked through the doors. I'm just wondering, for everyone that's sort of thinking, what's that lifestyle like? Because you see Wolf of Wall Street, I'm pretty damn sure it's not like that.
Just a second.
But yeah, what is it like? What does your typical day consist of, and what's the pressures and stresses of like?
Look, the industry now is heavily regulated off the back of that. So what you see on them programs isn't how it is. You have to be very strict in how you conduct yourself and everything that you say to clients, because everything is monitored on a day-to-day. All my chats, all my phone calls, I'll look through and flagged if there's any issues, if I say anything that I shouldn't. So from that aspect, it's not as fun as what you think it is. However, I like it because of the adrenaline. The competitiveness is very similar to that of being a professional athlete. and that's what drew me to the industry initially. You work hard. I start at 7. I probably finish at 7 most days, or between 6 and 7. But then at night, I'm out with clients, and that's great. Like, I'm experiencing London. I know people will be like, "Can't feel sorry for you. You're going to all these nice restaurants," which is great, and I'm trying to appreciate it as much as I can. But at the same time, like, I have a girlfriend. I have Emily there. I'm working all these hours throughout the day, busting my balls, and then at night, I'm out a lot with clients as well. And that's only going to get worse the more senior I get. Not worse, but like, it's what's expected. But I love that about my job. I love the adrenaline. I love the fact that I grind every single day. I learn something new every single day. I'm out of my comfort zone every single day, because that's in every area where I've grown as a person, professionally, personally, has been when I've been out of my comfort zone. And I wake up every morning and I'm walking to work, and I have like an ethos of what I say to myself every day. But it goes like, I'm alive, a new day to seize. My mission today is simple: to be the best that I can be, to be positively infectious to everyone I see, to see the good in everything, no matter how hard that may be. Compassionate and understanding, but appreciation is the key. I demand to push my limits, to leave my comfort zone behind, to break down walls and barriers that no doubt I will find. I will embrace the pain, as without it I cannot thrive, an essential ingredient for fulfillment that makes me feel alive. I'm not scared of failure, in fact that's what I seek, but only then can I learn and grow to reach my infinite peak. By doing this brings me closer to reaching that end goal, of inspiring the belief that anything is possible if you just reach into your soul. Although this plan is important, it is essential to relax, rest and play, for in the end all that matters are the moments that take our breath away. And that's something that I will recite every morning when I'm walking to work, as a reminder of why I'm doing what I'm doing and keeping me focused on the day ahead, essentially.
It's mad that. Where did you get that from? Is something you made up or something you heard?
I just tried to think of everything. I read a lot of goal setting and personal development, and I just went through everything that matters to me and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then made a bit of a poem out of it, something that I could remember on a daily basis as a reminder of why I do what I do. And then
learn something new every day. I didn't know you did that.
I didn't plan to actually tell it. I didn't plan actually to say that, because it's quite personal, but I thought
some might benefit from that though, like you say. Like, a lot of what you're talking about today, people will struggle to listen to, because people will be living the similar experience that you've had, maybe hasn't gone their way and they've lost loved ones or things like that, or they're going through tough times. So it will be inspiring. Some people say you can actually go through all that stuff and come out the other end.
Nice one, mate.
Yeah, fair. I'll give you some shit later.
Would you write that down so we can put it in the comments on there?
Of course.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
No problem at all.
Do you want to talk a little bit about a like?
Yeah, so a like is a peer-to-peer support platform. It was an idea that I was actually thinking about at university, and I found out a guy called Bradley was already running a similar thing. So I reached out to him and said, like, this is marvellous. One thing that I struggled with when I was going through treatment was that you only ever saw ill people around you. So to have someone that had been through it and come out the other side, come in and actually speak to you and have a crack with you, how that made you feel. Like, you were just full of hope. You're like, if he's made it through, I can make it through. So a like is a platform that helps support that, and it's something that we've helped fund through our events, and it's something that I will continue to kind of share and embrace and try and be as a bigger part of as I can.
Awesome.
Mental, isn't it? So the other part of your life, picture. So we're going through your obviously your personal business. You've got obviously Emily, and you two have got your relationship going there. So between work, your relationships, and everything else going on, you're a busy guy, and like you say, there's not much time left in the day. So one thing I want to know is why do you do pitch up? Like, well, I have my idea of why I do it, and you probably have your personal reason for how do you fit pitch up in, and why is it sort of important that you want to do it?
I like pitch up because it's with you two for a start, first and foremost. Second thing is it keeps me in touch with home and people from home. Thirdly, I feel like I'm giving back by doing it here. I want something that I can be proud of, that I can be remembered. Because I think, without going too deep, when I went through the treatment, I always thought about how would I be remembered, and I wanted to create something that I would be remembered for. And I also wanted to have a positive impact for people to have a good time. And I remember when I was going through treatment and thinking, oh, I remember when I went to that party or I went to that event, and them special moments were what you remembered, rather than probably, obviously there's a bit to do with football, but after like you getting a grade A in whatever subject, or you doing something at work and getting a pat on the back, like you don't think about that stuff. That isn't essential at all. It was more, remember that moment, remember that time with that friend, remember when we laughed about that. And I wanted to create them moments. And I think when you came to me with the idea of creating Picture, it was like, that's perfect. It fits into my philosophy. I'm doing it with my best mates. I'm helping give back to the town at the same time. That's why I do Picture.
Awesome.
Class.
And what's your sort of vision for Picture then? Where do you think we can take it?
Well, who knows? We can take it as far as we keep pushing. I think we've still got plenty of work to do here in Barrow. That's our aim initially, to obviously keep providing these moments for people, to bring something new to the town, which is what we've kind of had our heart set on from the start. But then I envisage us expanding, potentially opportunities for Carlisle, broader cities. But yeah, I mean, at the moment we're taking it day by day. We're enjoying it, and that's the main thing. We enjoy speaking to each other all the time. I probably speak to you guys more than my girlfriend, well, 100% more than Emily. Yeah, where do you see it?
It's a tough question, isn't it? Because we've got that much opportunity now. It's hard for us to decide where to go, what to do. Just like we spoke about earlier, the power of reaching out to people. And we meet that many people doing it. That's the bit I like the most. Yeah. Learning about other people, how they operate, how we can help them, collaborating with people. We've got that many directions to go in now. There's going to be a point where we're going to have to choose what we do. But it's a question I want to know, because our very first event that we did, we threw together. We were selling tickets at the car park at Holker in lockdown on the beers. We borrowed pickups off PKA to move all the beer. Like, I know how we were feeling, because we were here every day taking deliveries that you'd ordered while you were sat in London. But that first event was pretty much you paid for it. It's your risk, and you didn't once waver or panic. You just kept sending picnic bench after picnic bench, beer order. You were going through trying to buy your flat at the time. Like, you had a bit of pressure, but I want to know how you were feeling on the lead up to that event, and then after it.
I think the reasons why I do what I do and work as hard as I do is to get money, not so I can invest in myself all the time and create this massive fund, because I'm not going to have it. More of a case where I want to use this money to support us. For people that matter to me most, I would much rather be giving that money to them as opposed to building some sort of, I don't know, my own financial gain out of something. That's why I do what I do. That's why I work how I work, and that's what I will continue to do with my money, is to, because that's what life should be about for me. That's how it should be about. If you can help your mates out, if we can create something together, that's far better than me creating something on my own. And I will continue to support us no matter what. And if that means a financial risk at times, then so be it. Might need to hide that from Emily, but I'm a dad now. I'm a dad.
Did you panic? Was there any shred of doubt leading up to that first event?
No, not really. Not the first event. The festival, yeah.
Festival, yeah. Oh. But that first event we had, like, there's a fair few £1,000 spent on that first event. If you think about it, it's probably 15 grand just putting that first van back on. Wondering if anyone's going to buy a ticket.
Yeah, we got lucky.
We were panicking.
And the tickets, like, that's the thing with events, like, the financial risk is one thing, and people turn up, but it's also the side, like, the rigmarole and bureaucracy of fighting against councils or the people within the SAG. I'm not saying you fight against them all the time. A lot of them are really helpful as well, but you're just trying to do a positive thing. You put this event on in an area for people to come together, enjoy themselves. You put security on. You do everything you can, and you always feel like you're in a doubt that someone's going to come along with a bit of paperwork and say, no, not happening, which happened to us in the first one, and maybe rightly so. It was our fault. We weren't in the rules, but when you're trying to do all these positive things and you've got your own financial risk for you mainly on the line, and you're hoping that the risk is that's what really gets people back up in this area. And I think Ulverston seem to do it really well. I don't know how they do it, but it seems to be a lot easier to pull these things together. And now they're prospering from it. Everyone wants to be in Ulverston. Everyone wants to go have a night out here.
Another fine fest. The whole town, everyone from Barrow, lining the streets, drinking, music, magicians, acts, arts. And then,
it's like a community here, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do here at Pitch Up, is bring whoever comes to our events, we want them to feel like they're a part of our Pitch Up community kind of thing. I don't know, that's what I'm trying to get to.
I think it's fair to say as well, like, just put on record, we also want to support other people trying to make a difference in Barrow. So whether it's not our event or not, if someone, like, for example, Foodstock, I've asked if we can borrow some off us, or more than happy to support things like that, because at the end of the day, we want to see Barrow, as we were saying to Simon on our last podcast, we want to see Barrow capitalise and all this money and investment come in the area, so that we're going to live and work here. So we want to see a lot of things to be going on here and things to be happening, to be fair.
Well, you mentioned about the fund the other day, didn't you, in chat? What do you want to mention it?
Yeah, so hopefully, one of the ideas obviously we've had that we want to make it fruition is, we haven't got a name for it yet, but basically it's going to support children or young people in our area, so the Barrow and Furness area, or as wide as Cumbria, that have got a special talent in any area, so it could be sports, arts and crafts, science, one of the STEM subjects. And if they can't afford, for example, if someone's playing football away like you did, and you've said that your parents were the ones that were footing the bill of driving you there and back 2 or 3 times a week, not everyone who's got a talent has got that same backing and opportunities for people to support them. So I think it'd be good for us if we can, through our events, raise money and obviously get local businesses involved to say, right, let's get a fund together and give these young people in our area a chance to dip into this money and support their dreams like you've been able to do, and back them in that sense. I think it'd be a really good thing for us and the wider community to get behind.
It's something that we're going to reach out to all local businesses to support, isn't it? But imagine you were travelling to football week in, week out, and your dad said, I can't take you this week. Yeah. I can't afford the fuel. Like, people dropping out from realising the potential of the dreams due to not having availability to those funds for whatever reason. It doesn't matter the reason. Giving up on the dreams that you realised. Yeah. We are trying to actively prevent that, don't we?
Yeah, and there's so much of that in Barrow. Like, I went to school I went to Thorncliffe, and there's people in my year that were far more talented than me, and in football or other things that probably didn't go on to achieve some of the stuff they could have done just for that sole reason alone, because they maybe didn't have the backing, or it happens all over, and it's a big issue for Barrow. Like, if you live in Manchester, you can get a train, you can walk. It's 10, 15 minutes to these big opportunities. Where if you live in Barrow, it's a whole different ballgame around the peninsula. Yep. And if someone's not backing you, you've got no chance. Mm-hmm. So definitely something we should start.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, do you want to come in here a sec? Come in here. Sit down, got a question. I've got an announcement of my own to finish after this big podcast. So I'm going to be a dad. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Get it.
Oh, hey. Wow.
I try to keep it a secret since Centre Parks. So you've been asking me, obviously, Jade wasn't drinking.
Yeah, that's why she's not been out.
So she's not been out. I was like, fuck's sake, like, how should you keep this a secret? It's horrible, like tiptoeing. We had our 12-week scan yesterday or the day before. So day on the piss. Yeah. Was it?
Picture up, baby.
That'll do us anyway.
Oh, that's fucking class.